Now that we've covered while loops, I'd like to use that knowledge to code up the guessing game. And if you've never played the guessing game before, basically what we're going to do is we're going to have the computer pick a number between 1 and 20, and we're going to input guesses as to what that number is. And if we guess too high, we're going to print out higher. If we guess too low, we're going to print out lower. And we're going to keep doing that until the player gets the guess right. So let's start a new C# console application. And let's call it the guessing game. Now for this I'm going to need a couple variables. I'm going to need a variable to contain the player guess. I'm going to need a variable to contain the input that the player reads in from the console. The player guess is going to be an integer. The player input is going to be a string. And then I'm going to need something to control my loop, because I want the game to keep going until we guess the number right. And the variable that's going to control my loop, I'm going to use a Boolean. So let's get this started. Int player guess will be the player's guess. Player input will be the input from the keyboard. Bool is number guessed is going to be our loop control. And we're going to set that to false, because obviously we have not guessed the number yet. And then I want one more integer called the answer. And this is going to be the answer that will win the game. Next, I need to be able to generate a random number. So just like in my other example, I'm going to say random RNG equals new random. And I'm going to set the answer equal to the random number generator's next random, and I want it to be between 1 and 20. Since the upper bound is exclusive, I need to use 21 instead of 20, as we covered before. Now the game is all set up. I've got places to put all the input, I've got a loop control variable, and I've got the answer that the player should have to guess. Now I got to decide which kind of loop I'd like to use. I could use a while loop, or I could use a do while loop. Now I'm going to use the do while loop because I want this game to at least run one time. So I'm going to say do, and then I'm going to put my code block, while the number is not guessed. So is number guessed is false, and I'm going to use the not sign to make it true, because a loop will only run while the test condition is true. So while the number isn't guessed, we're going to play the game. How do we play the game? Well, we have to ask the player for their guess. And then we're going to read that in to our string variable using console readline. Then we need to turn that input into an integer. To do that, we're going to use the int parse. So we want our player guess integer to be equal to int parse of the player input. Now we need to see if they won. So let's say if the player guess is equal to the answer, then we'll write out at the line, you got it. If they didn't win, then we need to decide if they were too high or too low. So in the else statement, I want to say if the player's guess is greater than the answer, we want to print out that the guess was too high. If it wasn't equal and it wasn't too high, then logically it must be too low. And the last thing we need to do is figure out how we're going to get out of our loop. Right now we're going to stay into the loop until isNumberGuessed becomes true. So where should we do that? Looking at the code, we want to set isNumberGuessed to true when we win. So after we print out you got it, we will say isNumberGuessed is now true. When it gets to the bottom of the loop, it's going to say not isNumberGuessed. If it's true, not will make it the opposite, which is false, and it will fall out of the loop. We can put our console.readline at the bottom so that the application doesn't close on us. So let's go ahead and run this and try it out. I'm going to enter my guess. 5, too low. Let's try 10. Still too low. How about 15? Still too low. 18, too high. 17, we got it.